technical difficulties to start the 106th episode of the Athletes Podcast. But Scott,
106.
nonetheless, it's pretty crazy. I appreciate you so much for coming on the Athletes Podcast, helping to share, educate, and entertain the next generation of athletes. You're a best-selling health and fitness expert, focuses on prehab and rehab training specifically to help athletes with common injuries and how to train and ultimately protect themselves from those injuries. I'm super excited for this conversation. Think it's going to be a benefit for a ton of people who listen. I'd love for you to start off maybe by giving a bit of background on who you are, why you started training athletes, and how you are going to continue to do this for many years to come.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Dave. It's great to be on your podcast. I'm excited to delve into the details. I think, like most people, you kind of find your way through personal experience. Things happen to you, and that's kind of how you start to figure out like what it is you're supposed to do, what you like. In my case, I had a really bad low back injury. I was playing basketball, and I just went up for, like, someone threw a long pass, and I raised up my right arm to try and get it, and I just felt something in my low back. And then it got worse and worse and worse. I kind of ignored it, which is something we can get into. I'm sure a lot of athletes do this. You just kind of play through the pain. You figure it's just going to get better in a couple days. It just kept getting worse and worse. And I was in my, early 20s. So I just figured, whatever, like, it's going to heal. And it didn't. It just kept getting worse and worse. And it got to the point where I was so bad I couldn't, like, sit. I had terrible sciatic pain down my right leg. I was laid up for 6 months, couldn't even get out of bed, basically. And, at that point, it was like, get an MRI, learn that I had a bulging disc, which was 10 millimeters out, which is, if you know a little bit about this, that's a lot. That's a really, really big bulging disc. So I had recommendations for surgery and, stuff like that. I did not want to do surgery. And so I just had this feeling that there was something that I was missing. I went and saw all these specialists. I did acupuncture, I saw physical therapists, I did massage, I did chiropractor. I did everything I could think of to try and get myself out of this hole I was in. And it started to get really depressing. And I started to feel like, I'm going to have to give up basketball. I'm going to have to give up the sports I love. I'm not going to be able to play again. I'm not going to be able to do anything. I'm going to be kind of an invalid. I'm never going to get out of pain. And you start reading about back pain. It's like 90% of Americans get back pain. It's a really, really common thing. And once you get it, it's hard to get rid of it. So I went through all these different emotions and blah, blah, blah. More time went by. And eventually I started to feel like, I feel like I'm a pretty smart guy. There's got to be a way out of this. And so that's what sort of kicked off my love of figuring out how the body works. And I discovered that in the case of the low back, and this applies to almost every other injury around a joint, there's usually some postural distortions and muscle imbalances, and that throws your back out of whack. And in this case of the back, it's usually the hips. And so once you fix that, you will start to feel better. And I worked on it and worked on it. I started feeling better, and I knew I was onto something. Learned more, tested, retested. And that's what drove my love into fitness, helping other people. Once I fully got out of pain, I was like, man, I got to share this stuff. So I started training, became a trainer, worked my way up, started training lots of celebrities and athletes. And my whole thing was like, don't believe me. It's not about me. I have no ego about this. Let's just test this and retest it. And after years and years of doing that, it kind of evolved into what I now call the Malin Method, which is the system I developed over years and years of, real world testing it with people and myself to discover like what works, what doesn't work, throw out the stuff that doesn't, keep the stuff that does, keep iterating on it, keep trying to find ways to, because fitness keeps evolving, right? Like you look at players from 30, 40 years ago, and then today, the power they can generate, is enormous. And it just makes it all the more important to know this stuff, to protect yourself. And so that's what the Malin Method is about. It's about both protecting yourself, which we call prehab, and then rehab for if you do get injured. It's really important to get to the root cause of that injury, fix it properly so that A, you heal faster and better, but B, you don't get re-injured and go through that cycle of like, now I just got like a bum knee and I'm still trying to play and I can't play like I used to. And it keeps getting, or a sprained ankle, it just keeps getting hurt and hurt. Now I got to wear braces and all of a sudden now my knee's hurting. And so all these things kind of domino effect. So my whole thing is, number one, if you're someone who's had chronic pain or a bad injury, my main message is you don't have to give up on the sport you love. You don't have to give up on your life. You can get out of pain. You can get back to what you were before and even stronger. You just have to start to understand how the body works and support that instead of fighting against it.
Makes total sense. This is a very timely episode because I threw my back out a couple days ago, actually, and have been taking it easy.
I don't mean to laugh at your pain, but
that's okay.
Coincidental.
Hey, it's well deserved because I was being an idiot and, lifting up weights after not warming up properly, and it's, being youthful and trying to rush through a workout, and I've learned my lesson, and it's a reminder to make sure that, hey, like just no matter your age, you need to treat your body with respect and make sure that you're warming it up properly. But with that being said, how should people be going about their daily routines, making sure that they're incorporating specific aspects into their, morning schedule, evening schedule to ensure that they're not getting injured? Because for me, I've talked about it on past episodes, but, in this recent job where I've been doing more sitting at a desk, this is something where I now am using my standing desk religiously to ensure that I'm not sitting as much. I'm focusing on my posture, making sure that I'm doing a better job there. What are some, simple checklist things that people can be doing in their day-to-day lives to ensure that they don't end up in that injured state?
Absolutely. So, there's sort of like an umbrella that goes over all of this. And then you start getting into more and more details because everyone, when I first started, people would ask me, what do I do? And I would tell them, I've never met anybody that just said, yeah, I'm good. Like I have nothing wrong with me. Like, it's nice to meet you, go on your way. Everybody is like, oh, I got this shoulder that just is bum shoulder that just, I can't get rid of it. Or, I had a knee injury and it's just never healed. Like everybody has some nagging, lingering thing, usually, especially if you're an athlete. Something has happened to you along the way, especially if you're playing competitively or pro. You've definitely had injuries. Everybody does. And so the question is, what do you do to address that? In terms of your specific question of what do you do day to day, the first thing is move as much as you can. I'm the same way. Like I sit at a desk, I have to do work at a desk too, but you just have to keep moving. Your time at the gym should almost be like a religious experience. It should be like your temple, it should be your church. It should be that place where you go and you get to unglue and undo all that stuff that's harming your body the other 23 hours of the day. You might be sleeping wrong. Sometimes you sleep on your shoulder and you wake up and your shoulder hurts, or you're in a funky position when you're sitting and all of a sudden your knee hurts, or you're playing a sport and you're doing the same repetitive motion over and over and over again, or you're hunched over a computer, whatever it is you're doing. And it's some combination of all those things, probably. The gym is your time to address those things and fix them. So there's two things you should be doing in the gym. One is you want to address any issues you have. And I'll explain how to do that. For example, a lot of people they like to do squats, right? They might do heavy squat, they might do light squat, they might do, whatever it is they do, deadlifts. The problem with those exercises, and those are amazing exercises, but there's a fundamental problem with them, which is that you're on two legs. And I guarantee you that one of your legs, it doesn't matter who you are, how high up in the food chain you are in athletics or sports, one leg will be stronger than the other. One weak leg will be less stable than the other. And if you don't know which one it is, and you don't address that, and then you start doing sports in a really high level where you're using a lot of power, instantly you can see how that could set you up for an injury. So what I recommend is do split squats. Instead of doing two-legged exercises, do bilateral exercises where one leg is in front of the other and you're starting to test your balance and test your strength. Does your left knee, when you do it, does your left knee feel a little wobbly? Are you feeling anything in that left knee? Is the balance the same as on the right side? Is one side, weaker than the other? So you start to learn about your body. It's the same thing when you foam roll. Am I finding spots? Where are those spots? So there's all kinds of stuff that goes into address your weaknesses. Don't ignore them, because your body can't speak to you in language. It speaks to you in levels of pain. So if you feel pain somewhere and you don't listen to it, it's your body's way of screaming at you, hey, pay attention to me. Like, this is an issue. And so when you go into the gym, that's your opportunity to kind of shore that up, right? Yeah. Then part 2 of your workout should be either sport specific, which we can discuss, or generating a base level, foundational level of strength and power, because that's what you're going to need in sport.
Okay. So our goal with the Athletes podcast is to educate as well as entertain the next generation. And I want to really focus on the education aspect in today's session, because I think this is where you can provide a ton of value, even though we already got some giggles earlier. When you talk about
laughing at your pain.
Yeah, when you talk about power and balance, starting from a good baseline, maybe let's dive into that for, a 15-year-old athlete or a 16-year-old athlete, maybe someone who's just becoming accustomed to going into the gym, lifting weights.
Yeah.
Let's go in, and how would you provide that kind of suggestion? And obviously there are exceptions to the rule and we can't make blanket statements here, but for the general population, for those who are wanting to get into the gym, maybe they've been in a COVID rut or whatever the case may be, and they're wanting to get back to their physical health, even 2022 and New Year's resolutions, when some people listen to this episode, what are some things that they can do to start building that foundation properly so that they can progress properly?
Sure. Well, the first thing you can do is avoid smaller muscle groups. So, I still go into the gym and see people spend their entire workout doing bicep curls. And it's like, first of all, nobody cares. Let me just, no one cares that you have bicep. Nobody cares. And your body certainly doesn't care. What matters, and maybe this is because I'm older, maybe it matters when you're 20. Now, nobody cares about my biceps. I can promise you that. So really what it's about is figuring out those bigger muscle groups. Again, are you tight in certain areas? Are you weak in certain areas? Are you strong in certain areas? So the first thing I would do is I would say, let's find out where you're weak. Let's find out where you're strong, and let's find out where you're stable, and let's find out where you're unstable. And again, the beginning needs to be shoring up those weaknesses and those tight areas. I've never met anybody who has perfect posture. It's pretty much impossible, especially today. So a lot of times you'll see, and especially 15, 16-year-olds. I mean, this is kind of we could go on and on this, but 15 to 16-year-olds tend to be pretty weak. It's like you said, they're just starting to work out. And even though they might think they're strong, they're not. I mean, if I train them, I'll correct that right away. That assumption will go out the window very quickly. Because there might be certain areas where they're strong, great, but most areas they'll be weak. So I'll address, like, have you had any injuries? So for example, have you had a sprained ankle? Most people have had a sprained ankle. If you haven't healed that injury properly, I call that a gateway injury, because if you think about your ankles, your calves, your feet, you walk anywhere from 5 to 10,000 steps a day, right? If you injure your ankle, and all of a sudden you don't notice it, but it doesn't heal fully, and it's kind of nagging a little bit. You feel a little tightness and instability. You might walk at a slightly different angle than you used to. And there's just a New York Times study, it was a few years ago, and it said just one sprained ankle can cause you to walk 2,000 less steps a day for the rest of your life. So it is actually like a more important injury than people give it credit for. Most people just think, oh, just rest a few days and you move on. It's not true. So all of a sudden now you're walking a little differently. Now your knee might be forced to move more than it's supposed to and jutting out at a little bit of an angle. It might be imperceptible to you, but if you take 10,000 steps a day, think about how many steps that is over the course of years or decades. It makes a huge, huge difference. So all these things matter. Is your posture okay? Are you rounding your shoulders a lot? Is your butt tucked under? Do you have a flat back? Do you have too much of a curve in your low back? What's going on in your knees? Are you able to, do you have stability in your knees? Can you go down into a squat or a lunge and your knees don't wobble all around? So I would say, first and foremost, focus on your legs, focus on making sure that you're flexible. It's easier when you're younger to be flexible, but shore up any of those issues and then start working on strength. Don't worry about power yet. And also really make sure that you're A, doing the right exercises, and B, that you're using great form. What do I mean by the right exercises? Let's say that your hamstrings are really, really tight and your quads are really, really weak. You might not know that, okay? Your hamstrings are overtaking everything and your glutes are really, really, or your quads and your hamstrings are really strong, let's say, and your glutes are really, really weak. Well, if you're doing squats and you don't know how to activate your glutes, you're actually going to do more harm than good, because your glutes should be the quarterback. The hamstrings and the quads should be your supporting muscles. Even though they're really big, your glutes are the quarterback. They're the biggest. They should be performing that movement first. But if you don't know how to activate your glutes, your hamstrings and your quads will keep getting stronger and tighter, and your glutes will keep getting weaker. And then when you go to perform some kind of a movement in whatever sport you're doing, your body's always going to go, you know, your mind is the boss, right? You're like, hey, I want you to move this way. And your body's going to go, you're the boss, I'll do it. And it doesn't always have the ability to recruit the right muscle groups to make that movement happen. And when it has to recruit smaller muscle groups to do what the bigger muscle group is supposed to do, in the case of your back, that's probably what happened. Your back probably wasn't warmed up enough and you didn't recruit the right muscles in that moment. And then your low back muscles, your core had to do the work it's not meant to do. And that's when your body goes, I tried. I'm sorry, I tried. And that injury is your body's way of screaming at you, you have an issue. So at that point, you can say, I'm going to address this and fix it, or you're going to keep on doing what you're doing and, you know, it's just going to get worse.
So when it comes to activating those muscles, you know, for instance, if we're talking the glutes specifically, prior to performing a squat, for instance, you would suggest then maybe doing some hip thrusts, maybe some leg kicks, like give some background as to what people should be doing to make sure that they're activating those properly.
I would even go more rudimentary than that. I would say do bridges. And when you do bridges, because I've seen it even on myself, like, but you know, it took me a long time to master this. Can you relax your hamstrings when you do bridges? Can you relax your quads when you do bridges? Can you feel your hamstring while you're doing the bridges and watch how tight they get? Your hamstrings should be relaxed, right? Your glutes should be like rocks, like focused, you know, and activated. And your hamstrings, you should be able to keep them loose. That is a lot harder. It's a lot harder than it sounds.
I'm trying to do it right now. I can't even.
Yeah,
the way it's happening.
So my whole thing is I can take exercises that most people would think are easy and I make them impossible, because I say, well, okay, you can do this movement, but you're recruiting the wrong muscles. You're recruiting your hamstrings and your quads. So guess what's going to happen when you go do a squat? You think you're recruiting your glutes, and you might be to some degree, but nowhere near as much as you should be. So it's about learning how to recruit your muscles when they're supposed to be recruited. Obviously, when you're playing sports, you can't sit there and be like, okay, now I got to recruit my glutes. Like, it just has to become habit. It has to become instinctual. And that's what training is all about. You train over and over and over and over, just like you do in a sport. You do the same thing over and over again. It's the same with exercises. Learn the right way to do it 10,000 times. And then it's just robotic. And that's what you want. You know, you want it to just, you're going to do this movement and your muscles know what to do.
So one of the issues that comes from youth athletics nowadays, especially these past couple of decades, we've seen more than anything, is like you said, the repetition of specific movements for athletes.
Yeah.
You get a hockey player who starts playing at 5 years old and he's taking slap shots the same way for the next 20. His body's going to be breaking down in certain areas. And if he's only doing that on the right side,
exactly,
even more so, it's going to be amplified. So one of the things that I'd love for you to maybe touch on is how people can compensate when they're working out to recover those balances, if that makes sense. And, obviously it's going to be different, sport specific to unique. We have a variety of athletes who listen to the show, but, maybe showcasing or diving into that area where people can specifically learn how to build and make those weaknesses become strengths in the long run.
Absolutely. So I'll get specific about it. So let's say your right hip gets really tight. Let's say you've been moving in a certain way, whether it's tennis or hockey, you're swinging a certain way, right? Or baseball, and you just overworking that shoulder, whatever it is. When you get into the gym and there's a muscle that's really, really strong, most likely it's very, very tight. Okay. And so get in there, whatever tools you have at your disposal, whether it's a foam roller or a softball or a Theragun, whatever you got, get in there and get those adhesions and those knots out. Don't worry so much about stretching. Get out the knots. I explain it like this. Imagine you had a rubber band and you had a knot in the middle of that rubber band. That's your muscle. Now, if you stretch the rubber band on either side, that knot's only going to get tighter. So stretching, and then as soon as you let go, it's going to snap right back. The key is to get out that knot. So I'm a big believer in rolling, and it teaches you so much about your body too. Rolling out those areas that feel tight. Now, how do you know it's tight? Well, start this by two ways. One, just start rolling. You will instantly feel exactly like you're going to know. Like, and I tell people this kind of insights from what I've learned along my journey is, number one, if you feel an area get cold, if you're rolling an area and you get cold, well, that's probably an area that's not getting good circulation. That's a really important area to hit. Obviously, if you're feeling pain, that's an area that's probably got a knot. So you roll back and forth, you hit different angles, you pancake on it, you work it and work it and work it, and then you move on. Another thing you might feel is referred pain. Referred pain for me is like the ultimate jackpot. That means, let's say you're rolling on your hip and let's say you're rolling your glute medius on the side of your butt and you feel pain in your knee. Well, that's huge. You've just discovered why you might be getting knee pain or how to avoid a knee injury. Your glute medius might be super tight and it's yanking on your IT band, which is yanking on your knee. So by just foam rolling, or just rolling in general, you're going to learn so much about your body. Your right IT band might be just so painful, and your left IT band you might feel nothing. Well, obviously, spend all your time on your right IT band. Find those areas that are tight, spend time on it. The areas that aren't a problem, don't worry about them. Then you stretch a little bit because now you've gotten out those knots. So now that rubber band can stretch further. And then the last thing you do is you then start your workout where you build strength. And that helps you maintain that new range of motion. So you've gotten out the knots, then you've stretched, then you strengthen. And hopefully it's not like one time, but like over weeks and months and years, your body will not only have flexibility, but more importantly, it will have the strength to hold that flexibility.
Yeah, I think having that, the mobility to be able to perform those actions and still be powerful, have strength is so key. A lot of people will, spend hours doing hot yoga. I was guilty of it and trying to get super flexible when in reality, you still need to be able to move and work at those extended ranges of motion. Sorry.
Yeah.
How are people to, I'm trying to think of how, young athletes are always constantly going through and learning different ways to train. They have a million voices that they're hearing. Their parents tell them one thing, their coach tells them another. They hear Scott Malin tell them something different on the Athletes podcast. Like, no, it's okay. It's good because I think, an important lesson to learn is the perspective thing. You bring up foam rolling and how that's important, can be an indicator for a lot of things. And I think where I've seen the benefit from foam rolling, and I don't know what the literature or science states, but I think more than anything is it brings you to a present state where you can focus on your body and you can figure out and feel what's going on within your body and then address it. Because a lot of people are flying through every single day, whatever there is, work, school, homework, projects, whatever the case may be, and they don't realize like, oh, my left knee has been hurting for the last 6 hours and I had no idea. But now when I sit back, start to foam roll, I actually become aware of how my body's feeling. So that feeling of that notion of presence is important. And I think that might be where I see that benefit. Sal DiStefano from Mind Pump talks about that all the time. I don't know if you're familiar with the Mind Pump media team, but they're down in LA near you. And they bring up, the notion of presence and how important that is. So I thought that was just an interesting note.
I
When you
completely
bring,
agree with that. And that's a beautiful idea. It is about presence. Because like I said, the rest of the day, you're not really aware. Your time in the gym should all be present. It should all be, again, as I said, communicating with your body, listening to your body. Because if you do those things, if you discover like my left hip is tight and my right hip isn't, well, now, and you could discover that just from foam rolling. Well, now I know I need to stretch that left hip, and I probably need to strengthen my right hip. And that brings you back into a certain balance. You will never probably know it unless you went through that process. You could do squats and deadlifts, you never know. And so your body just can't talk to you. It can't say it in English. This is the process to learn to communicate with it. It wants to be there for you. You got to listen to it, and then the relationship becomes beautiful.
Yeah. Dr. Phenom Doc brought it up on his episode. What episode is that, Jordan? 90, 80 something? Yeah, Dr. Callum Cowan. I can't remember the episode number off the top of my head, but his famous line is you don't know how your body is supposed to feel until you get to the point when you're feeling 100% and you get to that stage where you're like, whoa, this is how good I'm actually supposed to feel on a daily basis. And I think a lot of people, to your point, are going through day-to-day lives with these injuries that are lagging and that they've become accustomed to over the past 5-6 years, maybe that they suffered in high school, university, whatever the case, and now have just, to your point, thought that they were going to end up having to live with this.
70% of knee injuries are non-contact. So ACL, MCL tears, and those are serious. A lot of them come from people had bum ankles. I remember when Derrick Rose hurt his ankle, had hurt his ankle multiple times in that season, his MVP season. And he was just crushing it, But if you watched him, he had so much power and so much speed. It was almost like his body, his joints could not keep up with him. You see the same thing with like guys like Russell Westbrook too. They're just so fast and so strong. You see it a lot in football players. You see it in every sport now. As I said, it's like the body hasn't caught up with what the training is doing in certain respects. So you're training to be so fast and powerful. Well, maybe the knees weren't meant to take all that force. So if you're going to move that fast, you better make sure that all your body dynamics are aligned, that you have good balance, meaning no postural distortions. The front muscles are strong and the back muscles are strong. They're both flexible and have mobility. So the systems that I created were designed to help you prehab your body. In other words, address these issues like I've been talking about. Is there a weakness? Is there too strong? Is there instability? Is there inflexibility? So addressing that, and then also dealing with any kind of injury you might have in that area and or chronic pain. So whether it's a new or an old injury, it's teaching you, you just kind of go along the videos with me. I'm walking you through each one. Like, here's the exercise you need to do. Here's the proper form, because go back to what I said before, like, don't do this exercise, do this exercise. If you do exercise A, it's actually going to reinforce your muscle imbalances. If you do exercise B, it's going to fix them. And so here's how you do it. So it's super important to know what to do and then how to do it. And so that's what the systems are kind of all about. They're a message to people, like, you don't have to live in pain if you're in pain, but ideally there's something that people should do before they get injured, because then you can kind of avoid that whole mess to begin with. And that would really be the ideal message. If I could send that to people, is like, spend, it's like you had mentioned, I refer to it as, imagine you're walking in ski boots And that's just the way you've always walked, right?
Yeah.
And then I say, why don't you take those off and put on some sneakers? And people are like, oh my God, I'm walking like it's so easy. That's what it's supposed to be like, but people don't know because, getting to that 100% takes a little bit of work, but it's so worth it, to be able to avoid injuries and or come back from an injury and get back to full health is a gift. There's no greater thing than like understanding that when you're in pain, you appreciate what it was like before that pain, and you'll give anything to get back to it.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would adjust from that is saying that I would say it takes a bit more than get to 100% of work, because, people will so often think that, oh, I just have to, follow my morning routine, make sure I do a bit of stretching, do some working out, and I'm good. Like, there's a lot of work that goes into the beginning, building that solid foundation so that you can get into the gym, go into your sport, and feel comfortable, confident to go in at full force and not have any issues. I mean, I look at a guy like Zion Williamson, to your point, that Derrick Rose style. He's doing all of these movements at 300 plus pounds, apparently, like ridiculous force that's being generated, stress that's being put on those joints. How should athletes then, because this is something that I know scouts are looking at now as well when they're looking at athletes to draft in upcoming years. It's like, hey, what does this guy's body look like? How does it perform? Do they have the prerequisites to be able to withstand, 10 plus years in a career if we're going to justify using a first round pick on these guys? So what can be their, couple of things they do that they take from this episode to ensure that they make sure that their body's functioning at 100%? Is there one specific course? Is there one YouTube video you recommend? I know you've got the how to do a push-up video that's got you 12 million views or whatever it is, but outside of that one, what would you recommend?
Well, I think that, in the case of Zion, and, let me just say this quick sidebar. I remember watching when Derrick Rose sprained his ankles in the playoffs. And I was like, oh my God, don't play. Take a minute, miss a couple games. Even if you have to miss this series, miss it. Because if you go back and you strap on an ankle brace, the ankles are a mobile joint. And then you go up the kinetic chain, and then the knees are a stable joint. And then the hips are a mobile joint. And then the core is stable. And then the upper back, the shoulders are mobile again. Once you mess that up, once you change that dynamic, you're in trouble. So that's why I said sprained ankles can be like a gateway injury. Because if you take a sprained ankle and it doesn't heal right, and it becomes unstable, and then you strap on an ankle brace to stabilize it, you've now made your ankle immobile. And so it goes back to what your body says, where your mind's like, move this way, and your body's like, okay, boss. And then what happens is your ankle can't move, so then the knee has to move. And the knee is only supposed to get 12 to 13 degrees of motion. So that goes back to what I said about those 70% knee MCL and ACL tears are non-contact, because maybe your ankle can't move right. So in terms of durability in a sport, I would say, again, go back. Have you been injured? Where are your weak spots? Where are your sore spots? Because if you're strong and you're powerful and you're generating lots of force, as you had mentioned, a guy like Zion or anybody else who's really, really strong and generates a lot of power, and you have a weak left knee, and you don't have good glute recruitment, it's just a matter of when. It's not a matter of if. So in order to make sure that you can have a long career, a successful career, a guy like LeBron, who's been so durable, he spends $1 million a year on his body. Now, not many people can do that, but what you can do is you can be smart, and you can say, first of all, if I get injured, I'm going to take the time to heal. I'm not going to cave to pressure. I'm not going to play through pain. I'm not going to ignore it. I'm not going to take Advil or Tylenol and just play through it. My body's screaming at me. I want to be in this for the long haul. I'm going to fix it. Take the time to rehab your body. And if you feel areas that aren't good, try to do a one-legged squat. Can you get down into a pistol squat? Can you get down into a one-legged squat on both sides? Can you stand with good balance on both legs? Are you able to do a simple bridge, like I had said, without your quads and your hamstrings going insanely crazy? Can you recruit your glutes properly? Do you have good balance? Is one leg stronger than the other? Take yourself through these things. On the show, on the upper body, are your lats super tight? Can you stretch really well on both sides? Can you go through the sports specific movements that you're supposed to do without any pain? Can you do them slowly? Is there an area that tightens up when you do it? Whether it's whatever that sport is, there's certain specific things you probably have to do over and over again. So my message would be, take your time on the foundations, shore up weaknesses, and slowly make it brick by brick by brick. You're 100% right. I kind of glossed over it, but yeah, getting to 100% is tough. It's really tough. It's not easy. And you will never get there if you have weaknesses that you ignore, and you'll just end up getting injured. And this is the worst part, is you have this weakness that you could fix, but you don't fix it. Then you get injured. Now there's a lot of damage there. It's 1,000 times harder to get back to where you could have been if you just spent a few months working on it.
I kind of equate it to almost the way your body gets sick. And when you are on that verge, you can kind of tell, you get the sniffles, you start coughing, you're like, okay, I got to take it easy, maybe take some rest, and then you can recover and you're back to normal. But if you push it when you're already feeling unwell, then the next couple of days you're going to regret it. And like you said, it's the worst thing ever. And you do anything to get back to being normal. Sick, injury, same thing. It's the same in my mind. And that's like one of our goals, is to make sure that we can stay healthy 24/7, 365, so that we can continue producing great episodes for the Athletes Podcast, right?
Nice. I do want to say one thing. I've been focusing a little bit on the negative of don't get injured, but I should also say there's a big positive side to this on the other side of the coin, which is that if you get good muscle recruitment and you're in balance and your joints are stable and strong, your lateral movement, your quickness, your vertical, your ability to move and stop on a dime will increase dramatically. So it's not just about protecting yourself from an injury. It's about improving sports performance. So it's both. You get the benefit of both. And that's super critical, because when you get to a certain level, every advantage that you can have counts. Every second counts. Every inch, quarter of an inch counts. And so if you could increase your vertical by half an inch or an inch or two, because now you're recruiting your biggest muscles, which are your glutes, that's probably worth a lot. So if you're able to laterally move and stop on a dime, and your explosiveness is great now, whereas mediocre before, all those things happen from the right kind of training.
It's astronomical, the difference that it can make, simply recruiting the right muscles to engage and to fire when you're looking for them to perform. And like you said, 1 second, 1 millimeter, whatever the case may be, that can be the difference between a gold and a silver medal, or a gold and a bronze,
could whatever be the case is. Going pro and not going pro.
Making your high school or your university team, we could go on forever. But at the end of the day, it is so crucial. And I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things that I think, we gloss over at times, or we bring up all the time, how it's not necessarily daisies and rainbows once you get to the professional sport realm, but it's without a doubt difficult to get there in the first place. So you want to do everything you possibly can to form that baseline and create an incredible foundation so that you can get to that point one day, hopefully using the Malin Method so that you can use that. Where can people find you on social media? Before we wrap up, you've given so many insights here. We always wrap up by asking our guests what their biggest piece of advice to the next generation of athletes would be. You've touched on a plethora of items that I'm going to be addressing. Number one being the pistol squat, because I'm still struggling with that. But where do you see the most value for athletes, if you were to summarize it into one sentence here, to educate that next generation of athletes?
I would just say, know your body. Learn to communicate with your body. Your body is always talking to you. You have to listen, and, ignore it at your own peril.
Love it. That was so precise, succinct. It was perfect. Where can people find you on social media, and how do we purchase the Malin Method for all of those who are looking to get after it?
I think social handles are all Malin Method.
Okay.
And I created a coupon for your listeners in case they care. Just type in athlete for the Athletes podcast, obviously.
Love it.
Athlete, and you get 25% off any of my programs, any of my systems. And they're all at Malin Method, which is just MALINMETHOD.com. And that's where you can learn more and find out, if there's a specific area of your body that's weak, or you can actually do like an all access thing where you can just get them all.
Amazing, Scott. I really appreciate your time. I'm excited to see athletes using your performance methods, and we will give you an update on how those pistol squats turn out, okay?
Thanks so much for having me, Dave. I really had fun.